You are so much today. We wait for other people yet. Would like also to thank the interpreters inside the box. If the people go too fast for translation, you say like that, and I stop the people 5 minutes for you, okay? That I am Patrick Obelis, the General Delegate of FISUEL, and I will manage this symposium today and on Tuesday, Monday, Thursday. Then Tuesday and Thursday. I just would like to remind with Jamal the different sponsors and partners. Could you say something about that? Where is the microphone, please? Just a few words about the...
Just we want to thank all the sponsors and the exhibitors who participate with us in this event, and especially for Bloombank, Eaton, Hyoki from Japan, Schneider Electric Lebanon, Crédit Libanais, France Bank, Mitsulift, Matelec, and APAP. Thank you all.
And the three partners there.
And the three partners, the Ministry of Energy and Water, EDL, Electricité du Liban, and the LCEC.
Thank you very much. Just to remind also the theme of the GAM, General Annual Meeting for Lebanon, is safety related to renewable energy. That the maximum of presentation of today and in 2 days is directly in relation with renewable energy. The general agenda is on Tuesdays and today. We begin at 11:30 to 1 o'clock, session 1, directly in relation with renewable energy. After the lunch, at 2:30, session 2, also renewable energy. After the break, at 4 o'clock, session 3, testimonies. On Thursday, we begin with the continuity of testimonies, session 4. Session 5, the regenerative power of lift. Session 6, directly in line with Sturgeon's presentation. 7, after the lunch, session 7, some words about the 4 new members of FISUEL for this year. General reports about the working groups on the session 8, and general information about FISUEL, the awards, and after the closing ceremony. And the best, at the end of the day, the gala dinner. You have received a lot of information that I will go so fast from the president of FISUEL, from Jamal, from Hussein. The vision of FISUEL, affordable, safe, sustainable access to electricity for all, everywhere, in residential and non-residential. They gave to you also all the different topics, including statistics and so on, fight against counterfeiting, for example. 24 members, 14 countries, 8 from 5 countries in Africa, 6 from 5 countries in Asia Pacific, 8 from 2 countries in Europe, and 2 from 2 countries in Middle East, Saudi Arabia, and Lebanon. Concerning the session 1, renewable energy, I will call Mr. Ushida after Mr. Vigier. For the third, Mr. Naimi, Miss Mortada, Mr. Jab. If I make mistakes, you said, okay? Okay. And at the end, Mr. Dobesi. We will begin with Mr. Ushida from FESIA in Japan. Where is he? Mr. Ushida, that you have the possibility to connect directly the file. Yes, but I would like, I said to Jamal just before, to call all the different speakers for the session 1 directly here. That Mr. Ushida, Mr. Vigier, Mr. Neme, Ms. Mortada, Mr. Diab, and Mr. Dobesi, as you want. And they stay, and we keep the President and Treasurer. The 4 first, okay, we will arrive. The 4 first, Mr. Ushida, go there. Go there. Take the chair there. And I will call you after. No, on the chair. Mr. Vigier, where is he? Let's go. Mr. Name, yes, okay. Miss Mortada, where is she? A place for Mr. With Sorina? It's enough here? 4? Ah, three chairs. It's okay, that's right. It's the beginning. When we start indirectly, we have also always problems. That now we will begin with renewable energy in Japan with Mr. Ushida from FISUEL in Japan. Thank you, Mr. Ushida.
Thank you for your kind introduction. My name is Hidetomo Uchida, and I'm from the Forum of the Electrical Inspection Association. I apologize, my primary English. And I hope that you will bear with me through this presentation. What I will be presenting to you today is an overview of renewable energy in Japan. To start off, I would like to describe the energy self-sufficiency and power source makeup of different countries. The energy self-sufficiency values for each of these countries are shown below the pie charts, and they are 18.4% for the USA, 61.1% for the UK, 53.3% for France, and 39.5% for Germany. The pie chart, the center of this slide, is the chart for Japan. And you can see that our country's energy self-sufficiency is extremely low at 6.3%, as we rely on imports for almost all of our resources, including oil and natural gas LNG. For these reasons, in order to ensure a secure supply of energy for Japan. Not only do we need a stable supply of imported resources that are not affected by international affairs, but another critical point is that we increase our energy self-sufficiency. Next, I point out that where coal or LNG fire, thermal power generation are the primary power sources in the makeup for almost all of these countries. Nuclear power is a key source of power in France, as we can see in the pie chart to the left. Another characteristic of resource procurement in Europe is that the countries are connected by transmission grids, and systems have been set up that enable the import and export of electric power. As we can see here, no country relies on a single source of energy, and all of them use a well-balanced combination of a variety of power generation modes. The North energy mix. Next, I move on to Japan past, current and future power source makeup. On the left side of the bar chart, we can see that prior to the Great East Japan, Arctics 2010, 7.5 of countries thermal power with oil fire, 25.0 was coal fired, and 29.3 was LNG fired. Nuclear power made up 28.6%, and renewables made up 9.6%. The middle area of this bar chart corresponds to 2011, when the Great East Japan earthquake hit. This triggered a major complex disaster which involved not only a severe tsunami disasters, but also radiation contamination caused by the nuclear power plant accident. And this has led to the stoppage of operation at all nuclear power plants nationwide. The current power source makeup reflects the roughly 1.7% of nuclear power plants that have turned operations since then, after verifications were completed on safety measures at a number of nuclear power plants against earthquakes, tsunami, and other natural disasters. These events caused the reliance on the thermal power to rise to extreme levels after the Great East Japan earthquake, and this has led to rising power bills and increase in greenhouse gas emissions. In response to this situation, the government announced the well-balanced and preferable combination of modes of power generation for the future 2030, which includes the resumption of nuclear power plant operation, as shown in the bar graph to the right. Next, I described the cost of generating 1 kilowatt hour of electricity in Japan by different modes of power generation. The lower band chart shows that with the current power source makeup as of 2014, nuclear power has a low cost of generation at 10.1 yen. Please note that this also includes costs for safety measures and accident response. We can also see that cost of hydro power is also low at 11.0 yen, thanks to the abundance of water resources in Japan. One characteristic we can note from comparing the current and future band charts for 2014 and 2013 respectively is that the cost of solar power generation is expected to drop high by 15.6% in 2030, and actions are underway to reduce cost by roughly 36% from current 2014 levels. These cost reductions are expected to be achieved through advances in high efficiency light energy conversion technologies. As we can see here, it's absolutely necessary for the government to work towards achieving lower costs moving in the future, and it is reviewing energy supply and demand structures for the future based on energy security, safety, environmental conservation, and economy to ensure stable supply of energy with less economic burden on its citizens. Next, I describe the carbon dioxide CO2 emissions for every 1 kilowatt hour generated in Japan by different modes of power generation. We can see that coal, oil, and LNG-fired thermal power, which provide stable supplies of power in ample amounts, and also produced large amounts of CO2, appear in that order on the left side of the chart. Seeing why, we can see that nuclear power and renewables such as solar and wind power produce little CO2 emissions. That being said, it's also true that none of these modes of power generation are free of CO2 emissions, as they produce emissions during the mining and transport of resources, as well as during the construction of power plants. So far, I have described the power source makeup, cost of power generation, and CO2 emissions in Japan. Next, I describe the 3 key points for discussing the energy mix based on this information. The first key point is about disadvantages and disadvantages of different modes of power generation. I describe the advantages shown on the left and the disadvantages shown on the right, beginning with the top row. The advantages of oil-fired thermal power generation are that this fuel is liquid and therefore easy to transport and store. Its disadvantages are that oil prices are volatile. Production is concentrated in the Middle East, and it produces large amounts of CO2 emissions. The advantages of coal-fired thermal power generation are that coal is cheaper than oil or LNG and is available globally, ensuring a consistent supply. Its disadvantages are that it produces large amounts of CO2 emissions during power generation, and ashes are left over after generating power. The advantages of LNG-fired thermal power generation are that this fuel is available globally, ensuring a consistent supply. This fuel also offers the best power generating efficiency of all types of thermal power. Its disadvantages are that it emits CO2 when generating power, albeit in smaller amount than from oil. Its prices are volatile, and it cannot be stockpiled for long periods of time. The advantage of nuclear power are that it can generate large amounts of power with small amounts of fuel, and it does not produce any CO2 emissions when generating power. Its disadvantages are that consequences from accidents can be severe, and the radioactive material must be strangely managed. The advantages of solar and wind power, which are renewable forms of energy, are that they require no fuel. They do not produce any CO2 emissions when generating power. Their disadvantages are that their power generation can be inconsistent, as they are affected by the weather and natural conditions. They are not able to generate large amounts of power. The advantages of hydro and geothermal power, which are also renewable forms of energy, are that they require not fuel. They do not produce any CO2 emission when generating power. The disadvantages are that they are only being developed in a small number of resources. They also require longer development lead time, and developable areas are limited. Our concerned key point is about equalizing the amount of power being generation and used. Because electricity cannot be stored in large amounts, the amount of electricity produced, power generated, and the amount of electricity used, power consumed, must always be kept the same. A characteristic of electric power is that its use can be interrupted if this balance is disrupted. I describe this characteristic using water tanks as an example to illustrate the relationship between the amount of electricity produced, power generated, and the amount of electricity used, power consumed. The example on the left shows a state where no problem has occurred, and the various modes of power generation pictures above the water tanks are working together to keep the water level in the tank at absolutely the same level by forecasting the amount of that will be used to determine the amount of power to produce. The example on the right illustrates a situation where there has been a spike in the amount being used, or a rapid drop in amount being produced. Situations such as these disrupt the balance and cost frequency fluctuation, which will then trigger safety device, ultimately resulting in major power outage. Because the amount of electricity consumed does not remain constant, power companies are able to provide a stable supply of high-quality electricity. By working together to adjust the amount of electricity that they produce based on the characteristic of each mode of power generation.
How many slides do you have? Yes. It's the last? Because, because we have 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Half an hour. That you have to go fast.
Okay. Five. Yes. I describe the different renewable sources of energy in Japan. The primary sources of energy that Japan relies on are such as oil and coal, but these are limited energy sources. Meanwhile, solar, wind, hydro, biomass, and geothermal energy sources can be renewed with a relatively short amount of time after their use, and these resources do not deplete. For these reasons, Japan has been promoting the introduction of these energy sources as green energy to replace oil, coal, and other fuels. As we can see in this illustration, the primary renewable sources of energy in Japan are solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, biomass, and wave power. I show you each of these modes of generation in the following illustration. Next, regarding solar power, the photo on the left is an example of panels installed on a residential rooftop. The photo at the center is an example of a large-scale installation. The photo on the right is an example of an installation on a body of water. Next, regarding wind power generation, the photo on the left is an example for illustration in immense areas. The photo on the right is an example of installation at sea. I grabbed hydropower generation. The top post show an example of an installation using an agricultural water channel. The bottom photo shown on an example of an installation using a dam. Next, regarding biomass power generation, the photo on the left shown example of a facility that uses wood chips produced in the lumber sourcing produce. The photo on the right shown an example of a facility that uses wood pellets and palm kernel channels. I describe geothermal power generation. The photo on the left show an example of a facility in a special district of a national park. The photo on the right show an example of a facility in a hot spring resort that uses geothermal steam to drive turbines. An advantage of this mode of power generation relies on the natural force of magma, and therefore requires no fuel. Next, regarding wave power generation, as you can see, here is an example of wave power generation illustration by the coast. A wave receptor plate board receives the energy of waves, and this is converted to electrical energy to generate electricity. Disadvantage of this mode of power generation is that the cost of illustration and maintenance are steep, and there are also concerns for their potential impact on marine life. My presentation is this all. Thank you for very much.
Thank you, Shida. Sorry for that, but we have about 15 minutes per speakers. We have lost something, but he has prepared a big presentation, so difficult that we can applaud him now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concerning the timing, we will presume we will finish about at 1:15, 1:20, and they will prepare the lunch, but we will become here at 2 o'clock. We'll try to reduce the lunch time. Now we can continue with Mr. Alexandre Vigier, Director of FISUEL in New Caledonia. He is accompanied with his president in, where is he? The president of FISUEL. He is not here? Sorry. There's the president. Alexandre. And I invite Sorida Mortada to take a place near, and Mr. Jab Hamad also near the president of FISUEL.
Bonjour à tous, je vais faire ma présentation en français. Alors, l'évolution de l'énergie renouvelable en Calédonie, du point de vue évidemment de la sécurité des personnes. Alors, où est la Nouvelle-Calédonie? C'est une bonne question. Je ne sais pas si le... La Nouvelle-Calédonie est au milieu de la carte, un petit peu au centre du monde. À côté de l'Australie, on voit déjà un peu mieux. Donc les objectifs du gouvernement de la Nouvelle-Calédonie, suite à la mise en place d'un schéma de transition énergétique, à l'horizon 2030, 100% de la distribution publique devra être réalisée avec des énergies renouvelables, soit environ 40% de la consommation globale. Si on regarde la courbe actuelle, la progression, en 2021, on sera à 66%. Le gouvernement de la Nouvelle-Calédonie a décidé également de faire un grand plan de communication pour la maîtrise de l'énergie, c'est-à-dire la diminution des consommations, la consommation raisonnable. Voilà une petite idée de la Calédonie vue en plus gros avec l'installation, les différentes puissances installées en 2018. Alors on ne va pas regarder le détail sur la carte, je vais vous faire ce détail avec des chiffres. Donc en thermique, nous avons 813 MW, soit 77% de la puissance installée. En hydraulique, 80 MW, soit à peu près 8%. En éolien, 58 MW, soit 5,5%. En photovoltaïque, 68 MW, plus 26 MW avec batterie, soit 9% à peu près des moyens de production. Pour une puissance installée globale de 1046 MW, interconnectés. Donc si on regarde un petit peu la répartition de la puissance installée, pour le fossile, les énergies fossiles, on a à peu près 77-78%, les énergies renouvelables, 22%. Donc on progresse petit à petit. Pour faire face à la consommation, la production de 2017, ce qu'il faut retenir, c'est ce qui est marqué en haut à droite. On a 79,5% qui vient des énergies fossiles et 20% des énergies renouvelables. Alors, les décisions de la Nouvelle-Calédonie du gouvernement. Je tiens à préciser que ces décisions concernent notamment les installations inférieures à 250 kW. Donc, le gouvernement de la Nouvelle-Calédonie a décidé de favoriser les installations photovoltaïques raccordées au réseau pour les maisons individuelles, lors de l'arrêté du 1er décembre 2015. Favoriser les installations photovoltaïques raccordées au réseau pour les professionnels, pour une puissance inférieure à 40 kVA. Donc ça, c'est l'arrêté du 24 mai 2016. Donc c'est relativement récent, hein. C'était une évolution sur les 3 dernières années. Donc c'est l'établissement recevant du public, c'est les collectivités, c'est les établissements recevant des travailleurs. Décider également de favoriser les installations photovoltaïques raccordées au réseau pour les habitations collectives, les immeubles d'habitation collective, hein, donc au travers de l'arrêté du 27 février 2018, vous voyez, c'est tout neuf. Et décider de favoriser donc les installations photovoltaïques raccordées au réseau pour une puissance surveillée comprise entre 36 kVA et 250 kVA. L'arrêté du 29 mai 2018. Là, l'encre n'est toujours pas sèche. Alors, on va s'intéresser dans le détail maintenant à tout le process de contrôle qui nous amène donc à l'assurance de la sécurité des personnes. Pour les maisons individuelles, les immeubles d'habitation collective, donc l'idée c'est de favoriser l'autoconsommation toujours, c'est le principe de base de toute cette réglementation. Mise en place également d'un tarif de rachat de l'énergie produite et l'énergie en surplus, donc 2/3 du prix de vente, avec une obligation de limiter la puissance de l'installation à la puissance souscrite, normal, ça c'est le contrat avec le distributeur, d'obtenir l'autorisation d'exploiter validée par le gouvernement de la Nouvelle-Calédonie, obtenir une attestation de conformité visée par le code FISUEL, c'est nous, et être accordé un compteur double sens. L'attestation de conformité, justement. Donc ça, c'est une obligation. L'obligation d'attestation de conformité vient donc de l'arrêté du 1er décembre 2015. Elle est établie et visée par l'auteur des travaux, elle est visée par le code FISUEL et elle permet la mise en service de l'installation photovoltaïque. Le processus de contrôle maintenant. Donc là, on est sur les installations pour les maisons individuelles, hein, bien sûr, et les immeubles d'habitation collective. Donc l'auteur des travaux achète un formulaire auprès du code FISUEL, constitue le dossier et lui transmet 20 jours avant la fin des travaux. Le code FISUEL procède systématiquement au contrôle et vise l'attestation. On contrôle toutes les installations. Le distributeur d'énergie concerné met en place le contrat précisant les dispositions particulières. Alors c'est les dispositions particulières notamment par rapport au rachat. Hein, le prix de rachat est prévu sur 20 ans et non révisable. Concernant les professionnels, l'idée c'est toujours de favoriser l'autoconsommation. C'est vraiment le principe de base. Il faut que les gens soient concernés et soient acteurs. Mise en place d'un tarif de rachat qui est égal au prix de vente. Donc c'est le tarif de rachat du surplus qui n'est pas consommé. On a l'obligation de limiter la puissance de l'installation à la puissance souscrite, toujours, dans la limite de 40 kVA, d'obtenir l'autorisation d'exploiter validée par le gouvernement, d'obtenir une attestation de conformité visée par le code FISUEL, et bien sûr être accordé à un compteur double sens. Pour l'attestation de conformité, c'est un petit peu la même chose que pour les autres installations. Obligation d'attestation de conformité, bien sûr, ça c'est marqué dans l'arrêté du 24 mai 2016. C'est établi et c'est signé par l'auteur des travaux, c'est visé par le code FISUEL et ça permet la mise en service de l'installation photovoltaïque. Le processus de contrôle est légèrement différent. C'est un organisme de contrôle privé agréé par le gouvernement de Nouvelle-Calédonie qui procède systématiquement au contrôle. Toutes les installations, une fois de plus, sont contrôlées. L'auteur des travaux donc, achète un formulaire d'attestation de conformité auprès du code FISUEL, constitue le dossier. Le code FISUEL vise l'attestation. Le distributeur d'énergie concerné met en place le contrat précisant les dispositions particulières. C'est les mêmes dispositions particulières, c'est un prix qui est établi pour 20 ans, le prix de rachat est établi pour 20 ans, non révisable. Pour le troisième type d'installation dont nous avons parlé, pour celles qui sont comprises entre 36 kVA et 250 kVA, là il y a le choix, c'est l'autoconsommation ou la revente totale. La mise en place d'un tarif de rachat fixe, le tarif de vente étant adapté à la situation du client. Je ne vais pas rentrer dans le détail, mais c'est vrai, selon les clients, le prix d'achat du kilowattheure n'est pas le même. Obligation donc d'obtenir l'autorisation d'exploiter validée par le gouvernement, d'obtenir une attestation de conformité visée par le code FISUEL et être accordé à un compteur double sens. Toujours un peu les mêmes obligations. Cette fameuse attestation de conformité, donc l'obligation est donnée donc, par l'arrêté du 29 mai 2018. Elle est établie, signée par l'auteur des travaux, toujours, visée par le code FISUEL, et ça permet également la mise en service de l'installation. Concernant le processus de contrôle, un organisme de contrôle privé agréé par le gouvernement procède systématiquement au contrôle. L'auteur des travaux achète un formulaire d'attestation de conformité auprès du code FISUEL, constitue le dossier, et le code FISUEL vise l'attestation. Le distributeur d'énergie concerné mit en place le contrat précisant les dispositions particulières. C'est comme tout à l'heure, ce sont des contrats sur 20 ans sans révision du prix d'achat. Alors pour résumer un peu tout ça, pour les maisons individuelles, pour les habitations collectives, le contrôle est effectué par le code FISUEL, le visa est donné par le code FISUEL. Pour les professionnels et installations à puissance surveillée comprises entre 36 et 250 kVA, le contrôle est réalisé par des organismes agréés privés, donc les bureaux de contrôle. Le visa est fait par le code FISUEL. Donc il s'agit bien de puissance inférieure à 250 kVA. Pour les installations supérieures à 250 kVA, le code FISUEL n'intervient pas. Il n'y a pas d'attestation de conformité. En fait, c'est ce qu'on appelle des fermes de production. À partir de là, c'est contrôlé dans le cadre du Code du travail par les bureaux de contrôle. Je vous donne quelques chiffres, donc avec 3 ans de recul, le premier arrêté datant de décembre 2015. Pour ces petites installations inférieures à 250 kVA, pour les maisons individuelles et les immeubles d'habitation collective, on a une puissance installée aujourd'hui de 5,4 MVA, mégawatts, si vous préférez. Pour les professionnels et les installations à puissance surveillée, on est aujourd'hui à 2,4 MW. Je n'ai pas fait la part du raccord des réseaux avec stockage et sans stockage, c'est global. D'accord ? Donc ça, c'est évidemment à mettre en comparaison avec les 1046 MW installés sur l'ensemble du territoire. Je vous remercie. Shukran.
Thank you very much, Alexandre. Just for information, if you have questions, we will see this at the end of this session. I invite now Mr. Beshara Naim, Assistant Professor at the Electrical Telecommunication and Computer Engineering Department of the Faculty of Engineering, USEC University in Lebanon. I'll leave you the floor, and I invite Dr. Sorina Mortada, where is she, to go to take place. Thank you. And Mr. Ramzi Dobesi can go and take place here, please. I'll leave you this. 12. I'll leave 15 if you can.
Okay. Thank you, and hello everyone. So I am Dr. Beshara Naim, and I will be presenting today this project, which is called Analysis and Characterization of Faults in PV Panels. So what we will be presenting today is how to detect faults in PV panels. And we'll see later that faults will lead to some kind of hazards like fires and so on. So in fact, this project has been developed in Marseille in the ELSIS laboratory of Polytech Marseille and at the Holy Spirit University of Kaslik, Lebanon. So the team is composed of myself, Dr. Tilda Aie, Dr. Aziz Naaman, and Dr. Nasser Sirdi. So our main objective is to increase the PV lifespan to 40 years. And this objective is also supported by the National Academy of Engineering goals and the 2020 European Union Climate and Energy Package. So they both suggest, or they both would like to increase the lifespan of PV panels. And what we will do, we will detect faults that are happening to these PV panels, and by that we will eliminate the risk of fire. So today we will see a small introduction. We will talk about the faults that we want to identify. We will see how we have tested these faults using an experimental apparatus, and we will see our diagnosis and, of course, the conclusion. So what is happening to PV panels is that they live for 20 to 25 years, their efficiency will decrease, and they will be subject to some hazards. We will see the faults later on, but of course their efficiency will decrease, and we may have some kind of fire in PV installations. So what is our solution? Our solution will be based on using a control algorithm to detect the faults in PV panels, instead of working more on materials and on different elements. So we are going to use a detection algorithm. And in fact, we'll be using a model-based diagnosis method. So in fact, we will be having measurement from the PV panel, and we will be comparing this measurement or the output of this PV panel with respect to an ideal PV panel. And if we have some kind of difference, so this means that we have a fault. And what we will do, we will analyze this difference, and we can detect what is the fault that is happening to this PV panel. So to start, this is a typical, So this is a typical PV panel. So this is a typical PV panel, and this is the equation of this typical PV panel. So the panel is composed of 36 cells with 2 bypass diodes, and of course we are getting here the output of the panel. So the first fault that we are studying is the interconnect and connection faults. So all the connections of the cells, which are inside the panel, they may degrade with time, and their resistance can increase. And also the connection that is linking 2 PV panels to each other, this will increase, it will degrade, and resistance will be happening here in series with the panel. Another fault is the bridge and earth fault. So inside the panel, we can have a short inside the cells, and this will dramatically decrease the output voltage of this panel. And the third fault that we are studying is the shunt path development. So inside our panel, at the output of this panel, we can have the connection or the cables will degrade, and we can have a current, which is a very small current, of course, that is passing from the positive to the negative connection without passing by the load. So in fact, what we are doing, we'll be measuring the irradiance and temperature of the panel, and of course, the irradiance and temperature are applied to this PV panel, and it is generating a current and a voltage at the maximum power point. We are, of course, measuring this voltage and the current. And at the same time, we will take the voltage, the irradiance and the temperature, and we will feed it to a PV model. So the PV model, it is the ideal model of the system. And we will be comparing these two. So this is the idealized output, and this is the actual output. And once we have a difference between these two, we can do a diagnosis, or we can detect the fault in a PV panel. So if we look at these two graphs, we can see that for the 3 faults that we have enumerated, let's say the faults, the connection faults, the bridge, and the shunt path development, we can see that the output will decrease or will change for any irradiance and for any fault. And let's see what will happen in details. So before seeing that, we have implemented an apparatus in our laboratory in order to implement these faults and see what's happening at the output. So the apparatus is made of a PV panel, which is illuminated by 2 halogen lamps. We also have a DC to DC converter in order to always track the maximum power point. We have a pyranometer in order to measure the illumination. And of course, we have made also our own small PV module in order to test the interconnection fault. Because with this small module, we can just put a short or a cable and emulate a short circuit. So we will be measuring we will be looking at 2 measures. The first one is the variation of the current. So it is the estimated current of the maximum power point minus the actual power point current over the estimated current. And the variation of the voltage is also the estimated voltage minus the actual voltage over the estimated voltage. And according to the value of these two differences, the difference in current and voltage, we can be in four hypotheses or in four conditions. So the first condition is where we have a normal situation, so mainly it is when the panel is brand new. Then we are in case H1 whenever we have an interconnection and connection fault. And here what will happen in green is that we have a variation in the voltage and the current, and we will mainly be in this region here. And whenever we have a bridge and earth fault, so it means that the number of cells in the panel has been reduced, so we can see a very high decrease in voltage, as we can see in the magenta points right here. And whenever we have a shunt path development, so we know that the current will decrease, and we will be in this region here, in this blue region, where the current will decrease. So we have identified three main regions for each of these faults. So our study will be based to locate our situation, where we are in which of these regions. So this is the simulation, what the simulation gives us. But what will experiment will give us? So in fact, we have almost the same results. So in green here, we have this curve or this region where we have the interconnection and connection faults. In magenta, we have the bridge fault, and in blue, we have the we have the shunt path development fault. So according to these three regions, it is now almost easy to get or to know which fault we are having. So this will be our algorithm. So first, we'll be measuring the actual temperature, the actual irradiance of our PV panel, and of course, the actual maximum power point, current, and voltage. And then we will calculate the difference, or in fact, before calculating the difference, we'll calculate the estimated value of the voltage and the current at the maximum power point conditions, and we will calculate the differences. And once we have these differences, we will decide. So mainly if we don't have any kind of difference, so we are in the safe side. And once we have this difference, we'll calculate the distance to which curve we are. So if I go back to these curves, so we have three curves, and we will calculate where is our position regarding these curves. And by that, we can generate a alarm and say that we are in this fault or in the other fault. So in fact, what we have done is we have developed a characterization algorithm or fault detection algorithm in our system, and we have specialized each fault signature. And for future work, we would like to implement this algorithm in an energy management system or in any kind of supervision system for renewable energy sources. And thank you.
Thank you, dear doctor. Now I invite for the subject Renewable Energy Lebanon, Dr. Sorina Mortada, from the Ministry of Water and Energy Lebanon, Senior Energy Efficiency expert and professor at the Lebanese University of Lebanon. I try to do like that because it is written very small. I leave you the floor. You have this. And I connect. Thank you. You want? Yes.
Good morning, all. My presentation today is about renewable energy in Lebanon. So the story started in 2010 with the publication of the policy paper for the electricity sector, where the Ministry of Energy and Water has talked about the implementation of renewable energy and energy efficiency measures. So back then, we developed, as Ministry of Energy and Water, a Lebanese Center for Energy Conservation, what we call the first National Energy Efficiency Action Plan for the years 2010 and 2015. The first NEA had included initiatives related to energy efficiency and renewable energy. However, when we evaluated this first NEA in 2015, and based on the recommendations of the League of Arab States and the EU directives, we decided as ministry to split the subjects, to have energy efficiency in one document that we called the second National Energy Efficiency Action Plan, where we talk about energy efficiency initiatives in all sectors like buildings, transport, industry, and so on. And we developed and published in 2016 the first National Renewable Energy Action Plan for Lebanon that tackles the years 2016 to 2020. So here you can see the objective. The Lebanese objective is to reach 12% by 2020 of the total energy mix in Lebanon, electricity and thermal coming from renewable energy. So in this table we have our target for 2020 and for 2025 and 2030. So you can see here, for 2020, the ministry has decided to implement around 200 megawatt of wind, 150 megawatt of PV, and mainly about 1 million meters square of solar water heater collectors. What does this constitute as renewable energy mix? So as you can see, here we have the distribution of several years. 2010 is in blue. You can see that we had only in the year 2010 solar water heaters of around 15% and hydroelectricity. However, in 2015, these two technologies remains, but with different percentages. You can see that the solar water heater installed capacity has increased from 12% to 22%, whereas the other technologies are not present yet. So what we are planning for 2020 is to change all these partitions, and you can see that we will be having wind energy of around 17% and also solar water heaters, hydro, and mainly bioenergy. So regarding the cost, in this table we have what we call the levelized cost of energy. As you can see, we have the lowest cost for the solar water heaters with 2.6 US cents per kilowatt hour, whereas the highest cost goes for geothermal. Here we have the geothermal is 20 cents, and the solar water heaters with 2.3 cents. For the comparison, we decided to say for solar PV and wind, the comparison was done with cost of production of EDL, which is around 20.2 US cents per kilowatt hour. However, for decentralized PV, the comparison was done with diesel generator, because with the distributed PV, we consider that rooftops have to replace in individual houses the need of generator subscription. For the CSP plant, the comparison was done with the two power plants that EDL have for Sur and Baalbek, where the cost is around 32 US cents per kilowatt hour. As you can see, if we implement, and it will be implemented, hopefully we have 1 year forward. If we implement the NREAP, we will be having extra supply of electricity hours of 604 hours of electricity, but the total budget for implementation is around $1.7 billion. That's why the Ministry of Energy and Water had called the private sector to help in the implementation of the NREAP through what we call the power purchase agreement, especially for the wind and for the first round of solar PV of 180 megawatt. I will be talking about these two bids later during this presentation. So the main milestone is to install around 100 megawatt of solar PV as rooftops, decentralized PV, 150 megawatt of central PV farms, but also to link energy efficiency and renewable energy. For instance, in what we call the NERIA financing mechanism, which is a green mechanism installed by the Central Bank of Lebanon and the LCEC, we have implemented the mandatory energy audit for facilities willing to install solar PV systems with capacities greater or equal to 60 kilowatt peak. That's why we are not working only on technologies to implement technologies like solar PV or wind or hydro or geothermal. We are thinking of a holistic approach by thinking about integrated approaches like green cities and green neighborhoods. So here you can see some photos of main installations. We have the BRSS, the Beirut River Soil Snake of 1 megawatt, and also the Dahrani oil installation of 1 megawatt. These are landmark projects that had a high cost because these projects were the first ones at a certain medium scale done in Lebanon. Other initiatives are put in place by the Ministry of Energy and Water, like the 10 public bids for 10 public buildings. The total capacity that should be installed is around 3 megawatt. We have also the NERIA decentralized solar PV systems, solar pumping projects that were done with the Council for Development and Reconstruction, and also other projects of solar street lighting. The total capacity installed till end of 2018 is around 52.11 megawatt of solar PV only. Regarding the prices, I just wanted to show in this slide how the prices has changed since 2014 till 2017. It's basically related to the implementation of the NERA financing mechanism and also of the awareness and capacity building among the end users and the private sector mainly. On the other hand, the next technology that had showed a large boom in Lebanon is the solar water heaters. You can see the red columns are the actual installed area since 2005 till end 2017, whereas the curve is the projected area. As I said, our target is to install 1 million meters square of solar water heaters, collectors in 2020. And as you can see in this figure, in some years we overreach of our target, and specifically in 2017, we had overreached also our target. So we think that for 2020, the 1 million meters square will be easily reached. Here you can see, I put this figure only to show that the end user is now aware of the importance of solar water heaters. He does not rely only on the initiatives done by the ministry or the Central Bank of Lebanon. As you can see, the projects that were financed privately constitute a large share of solar water heaters installed in Lebanon. Regarding the wind technology, as you all know, we had, as ministry, proposed a project of around 200 megawatt of wind power, which was based on 20 years power purchase agreement, where the private sector has to find the land, to finance the project, to install the project, and the government has only to purchase electricity based on a certain price. So the agreement, the first PPA, was signed on the 1st of February 2018 with a price of 10.45 cents per kilowatt hour for the first 3 years and 9.6 US cents per kilowatt hour for the next 17 years. So this was the first PPA that was signed, and hopefully for the solar PV, we are going in the same direction. So these are the solar milestones that the ministry is currently working on. We have now under evaluation the first round of 180 megawatt, which is around 12 farms in all Lebanese regions. We have a bid of solar PV with a storage of around 300 megawatt, and our colleagues from EDL also has launched the second phase of BRSS of 8 megawatt. So regarding the 180 megawatt solar bid, the purpose of this initiative was to have to install solar PV in all Lebanese regions. So we received 42 proposals from different partners, different countries even, in all Lebanese regions. After the first stage, which is the pass and fail stage, we have remaining 28 bidders are qualified. The bid is currently under evaluation, and hopefully the results will be announced soon. Other milestones for wind and hydro, an expression of interest was launched regarding a second round of wind between 200 and 400 megawatt. We had 42 expression of interest from 21 different countries, and the construction is expected between 2021 and 2025. My last slide is to show you the renewable energy actual mix, how much renewable energy constitutes currently and in 2020 from the total energy demand in Lebanon. In 2018, with all the projects I just mentioned, renewable energy constitute around 5.55% of the total energy need in Lebanon. However, if we continue as we decided or planned in the NREA with the same track of solar water heaters installation and decentralized PV installation, in 2020 we will not reach our target of 12%. We will be reaching 7.31% of total of renewable energy from the total energy demand in Lebanon. However, if we add the 200 megawatt wind, we will reach 11.05%, and we need definitely the 180 megawatt PV to be installed by end of 2020 in order to reach our target of 12%. And hopefully we will reach it because the 200 megawatt wind will be installed by 2020, and maybe the 180 megawatt wind will be installed by end of 2020 or early stages of 2021. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Sorina. We have yet 40 minutes. The lunch will be at the left, there, on the left, and the lunch just beside. Now I call for regulation measures for safety of solar systems in Lebanon, Mr. Ahmad Diab, energy analyst with some experience in renewable energy industry from CEDRO. You use that? You have to do what you want.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'll be discussing some local experiences with safety measures specifically for solar systems, solar PV systems in Lebanon, and some regulatory measures also. To begin with, a quick background and overview about the subject matter. The components themselves of PV systems undergo rigorous safety and reliability testing protocols during the manufacturing phase, and they fulfill electrical safety requirements, standards. These systems do not pose any health, safety, or environmental risk if installed properly and maintained in accordance with required electric codes. However, recently it's becoming more and more important to develop practices and share knowledge on the safe management and risk mitigation of PV systems under non-routine circumstances. Lebanon has been experiencing an exponential growth of solar PV specifically since 2010. However, we can say, at least, that in terms of regulatory oversight for the installation, commissioning, and interconnection of these systems, this regulatory oversight can be said to be minimal. To state the general risks, safety risks that are encountered, we have the risk of overcurrent, having the direct causes of overloading the circuit, short circuits, or ground faults, with the direct impacts of mainly damage to system components and possibly fires. We have the risk of ground faults and arcs, which is caused by damage to the conductor insulation itself and current flow in grounded conductors. The direct impacts will be high risk of electrocution for anyone in direct contact with grounded metal conductors. And also one of the highest causes of fires in solar PV systems. The third main risk is the risk of lightning and surge over voltage caused by direct or indirect effects of lightning, and sometimes surges originating from the utility network itself. Also, the impacts are damage to system components and possibly fires. Now, to cater for these risks and to answer these risks in an appropriate manner, and for the local projects and installations that the UNDP did, we reverted to international standards, international codes, international best practices in order to make sure that the solutions we're implementing, the projects we're doing are up to scale, are safe as much as possible. We did risk mitigation for these main these main safety risks. For overcurrent, this is mainly dealt with the installation of overcurrent protection components that can include circuit breakers, fuses, overcurrent relays installed in accordance with international standards on the DC side and on the AC side. An important thing to mention is also the correct type of the component should be also selected for MCBs, be it B, C, or D, for instance. For the ground fault and leakage current, devices called residual current devices or ground fault interrupters are used. They basically compare the current going to and coming back from the components, and if there's any difference above a certain threshold, they trip the circuit. To give you some insight about some local issues we faced with this measure, these devices are very sensitive, and they have an issue which is related to nuisance tripping. So they can trip also if you have transient currents to the ground, or if you have, in certain situations, a high inrush current. In Lebanon, we have faced some issues with these devices continuously undergoing nuisance tripping. We can say that this is mainly due to some noises in the utility network itself, and also the recurrent power outages, which require the turning off and switching from the utility network side to the diesel generator side every 4 to 6 hours or so outside of Beirut. For lightning and surge over voltage, of course, there's the surge arrestor devices selected, the correct type, type 1, 2, or 3. Also considerations for the type of installation, the roof type, metallic roof, flat roof, concrete roof. Also, if the roof has an existing lighting protection system or not, what are the required separation distances between the mounting structure itself and the LPS. We're currently investigating, which is, we can say, is in talks in 2018, was in talks in 2018, which is the rapid shutdown switches for first responders, for firefighters. It is argued that some institutions argue that these are very crucial, like the National Electricity Code in the US. However, some other institutions in Europe, like the TUV, also argue that these switches may give a false sense of security to first responders due to the nature of PV systems. As long as the sun is shining, there's always a large amount of voltage on the DC side. So other institutions argue that this false sense of security may result in further risks for first responders. Some general also best practice measures were applied also in all the sites as much as we can, including electromagnetic loop reduction, equipotential bonding of all exposed metal parts, proper material use for cable heads, and proper crimping and power cable connection, which is one of the highest causes of fires in PV systems. And last but not least, operational maintenance and regular checks for the system. Based on all of that, we can say that locally there's this there's these regulatory needs for solar PV system to remain under best practice operation, to maximize safety of operation. Mainly, we have no permitting process, so anyone now can go and install a solar PV system and connect it to the grid, and possibly backfeed excess energy to the grid, and possibly not feed any reactive power and increase the consumption of reactive power, which is very risky. And there is no entity or body that we can depend on to provide us and enforce the rules and regulations related to the codes and national codes approved components, strategies of interconnection, and other related matter. We should note, however, that to answer these needs, we need not reinvent the wheel. So international code standards and guidelines do exist. They are very developed. They are very well prepared. We can build on them, we can use them, such as the International Electrotechnical Commission, which has a long list of standards. The German Institute for Standardization and the National Electric Code in the US, some examples below. Looking on the positive side, there has been some positive effort when it comes to safety standards and best practices in Lebanon. The EDL Net Metering Committee, with assistance, of course, of the different agencies, including the Ministry and the LCEC, has set a list of required compliance standards, safety and other unacceptable components for renewable energy plant owners when applying to get enrolled into a net metering scheme. So you have to meet some or all of these standards before you get certified and get the green light to install a net meter, which is a large leap forward, and a salute to EDL. On another front, the best practices, guidelines, all the lessons learned, all the knowledge obtained from the local implementations, from working with international consultants, from looking at the different standards, were compiled and disseminated through different guideline reports, which are truly very important, that because they take the local context into consideration. They take the local knowledge into consideration, the local EPC knowledge, so what the contractors know and what they lack also. And I think it is important also to keep these updated because the industry changes, the internal knowledge also changes. To name the main reports that they include the Earthing and Lighting Over Voltage Guideline, Best Practice and Lessons Learned Guideline, Solar PV Hybrid Power Plants, and the Grid Interconnection Code for Lebanon. Looking forward, we can say that national and international cooperation between standards, experts, firefighters, technologists, key stakeholders are crucial to future success. A possible starting point would be clustering the knowledge established through different entities, be it EDL, international organizations, the Ministry of Energy, Order of Engineers, LibNor, sitting on one table, clustering the knowledge, and possibly establishing this independent authority that will be responsible for providing and enforcing the official national guideline for solar PV systems installations, safety codes, enforcing them, and what are the requirements of the National Control Center in terms of control, reactive power control, and all that stuff. We're currently at 50 megawatts, expected to be at maybe possibly at 200 or 250 megawatts by 2021. So action is very important at this stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Doctor. And now we'll finish this first session with the safety and renewable energy integration into EDL, Électricité du Liban, with Mr. Ramsi Debessi, head of the High Voltage Transmission Network Department at EDL. Yeah. And the microphone if you want. Is that okay?
Ladies and gentlemen, first I would like to thank the organizers of this symposium for giving me the opportunity to be here today and discuss challenges electric power sector in Lebanon is facing and the plans and visions to face these challenges, in addition to the measures that should be taken in order to integrate the renewable energy into EDL's network. The main problems the sector is facing can be divided into three parts. Administrative, due to the complicated laws and regulations dating from the 70s, and the strategy of the Lebanese government to stop recruiting in the public sector. in addition to the lacking of qualified human resources. On the financial level, a fixed tariff was set in the 90s and has not been changed since that time. Also, the inability to reduce non-technical losses on our distribution network due to political and security concerns. On the technical level, the lack of major investments in the production, transmission, and distribution sectors, especially between 1998 and 2010. The policy paper, which is a way to improve the electric sector in Lebanon, was issued in the year 2010. It represents a realistic implementation program for the fundamental rehabilitation and development of the electric sector in Lebanon to respond to the economic and social needs and objectives of the country. The roadmap represents the foundation of the integrated national energy program that aims to modernize, restructure, and rehabilitate the utility in an attempt to make it technically stable and economically profitable. The short-term plan, which is under the policy paper, was issued in the year 2010. It is an emergency plan financed by the Lebanese government under the Law 181, was a must to increase the production by 800 megawatts with the corresponding investments in the transmission sector. Most of the short-term plan's investments has been executed, like reciprocating engines power plants in Zouk and GE with a total capacity of 270 megawatts, and the 3 GIS substations in Dahi, Ashrafiyya, and Bahsas, in addition to 2 substations in Saida and Baalbek from the previous strategic plan. The master plan transmission was issued with EDF in the year 2013. It was updated lately in the year 2017. It covers the period till the year 2030 based on the existing power plants locations in Deir Ammar, Zouk, GE, Zahrani, in addition to a new location in Selata. The transmission master plan designates the necessary investments in transmission that are required to evacuate the additional generated power from the new power plants to reach the demand centers. The Council of Ministers adopted the transmission master plan in September 2017. Lately, the Ministry of Energy and Water, in collaboration with EDL, issued this updated policy paper, which was settled after coordination with the World Bank and was lately approved by the Council of Ministers. The policy paper aims to achieve 3 major concerns, which will work in parallel. First, reducing the technical and non-technical losses and increasing the bill collections. Second, increasing the generation capabilities with higher efficiencies, relying on natural gas to reduce the cost. And third, to increase the tariff. This roadmap could be the last chance to overcome the major problems the sector has been facing for the last decades. On the renewable energy level, the Lebanese government committed to adopt the utilization of renewable energies to reach 12% by next year and 30% by the year 2030. The renewable energy first project is the photovoltaic PV farm on Snake Beirut, on Beirut Snake. Its installed capacity is 1 megawatt. It could be expanded now till 7 megawatts. The bids are still under technical evaluation. On the level of waste to energy, we have now in operation 1 power plant on the landfill of Nami with an installed capacity of 7 megawatts. It's connected to EDL's MV network. Also on the level of waste to energy, incinerators are planned in Beirut mainly with the capacity that could reach 70 megawatts, in addition to several other incinerators in other regions in the country. For round 2 wind farms, last year, 3 companies were contracted to produce around 220 megawatts of wind power in Bayat region. Another 12 PV farms ranges between 10 to 15 megawatts with a total capacity of 180 megawatts are still under technical evaluation. For round 2, an expression of interest was launched for wind farms between 200 to 400 megawatts, in addition to 3 PV farms with storage with a capacity of 100 megawatts for each one and 70 megawatts hour storage. On the hydropower plants level, several hydropower plants are planned. The main 4 of them are Janni, Bakat, Tahdain, and Daraya, with a total capacity that could reach 170 megawatts. These are the locations of the hydropower plants. For the safe integration of renewable energy, and as mentioned before, the Lebanese government committed to adopt the utilization of renewable energy to reach 12% by next year and 30% by 2030 from several resources like wind, storage, PV farms, and hydropower plants. The expected locations of the round 2 wind farms are based on the Wind Atlas, where the highest capacities are in Jabal Akroum in Akkar, Rashaya, Marjayoun, and some locations in Mount Lebanon. The approximate installed capacity, as mentioned before, it could reach 400 megawatts. For the PV with storage, the location of PV with storage, the capacity, as we said, is around 300 megawatts, expected also in North Bekaa and Akkar because of the high solar radiations and also because of the relatively cheap lands. Another area of interest for PV farms is Tfail. It's located on the eastern border with Syria, with an advantage that the land is entirely owned by the Lebanon Central Bank from land ownership perspective, and it's ideal location for possible electricity trading with Syria in the future. The disadvantage of this farm is that it is far away from the grid with large capacity, where its integration requires a load flow study analysis. Because of all these renewable resources that could exceed 1,000 megawatts in the future, this will require reinforcement of the grid, and especially in Middle and North Bekaa, to increase its evacuation capacity. Accordingly, EDL will launch soon an addendum on the master plan, which was approved lately in September 2017. For the safe integration of renewable energy, the influences on wind farms integrations are mainly the voltage fluctuations and the harmonics. The voltage fluctuations are the main problems associated with wind power. This can be the limiting factor on the amount of wind power which can be installed on the grid. Voltage fluctuations can be during operation and are due to switching. The allowable frequency limits are generally established by individual utilities. The harmonic disturbances are a phenomenon associated with the distortion of the fundamental sine wave and are produced by non-linearity of electrical equipment. Harmonics causes increase in currents, power losses, and possible destructive overheating in equipments. Power electronic converters are used in variable speed wind turbine systems where the harmonics can be easily removed by smaller filters. In general, harmonic standards can be met by modern wind turbines. The impact on the grid. Integration of large-scale wind farms may impact severe impacts on the power system operation. Traditionally, wind turbines were not required to participate in frequency and voltage control. Some grid codes have been defined to specify the steady and dynamic requirements that wind turbines must meet in order to be connected to the grid, like capabilities of contributing to frequency and voltage control by continuous modulation of active and reactive power supplied to transmission system, power regulation rate that the wind farm must provide. The existing situation of EDL's network and its weak points towards integrating wind farms on larger scale are because of, first, the deficiency in energy, which is leading to load shedding, where there is no dedicated power plants to participate in voltage and frequency control, since most of them are working in base load regime. Hence, the ability to overcome the rapid variations of wind power production is very limited. The lacking of network stability due to the unachievement of the 220 kilovolt network. The renewable energy challenges conventional methods of dealing with contingency, where it was traditionally defined as the loss of the largest generation unit. Renewable energy generation is spread over many wind turbines, solar farms, so that the largest generation unit cannot be identified. The largest loss that can occur could be 100% of the wind generation. if this represents 20 to 30% of the total installed capacity, and if it occurs during peak demands, this loss cannot be handled by ramping up conventional power reserves and leads to a total blackout. The steps that should be taken to overcome the influences of wind farms integrated on EDL's grid are: first, closing the 220 kilovolt ring in Mansouriye and operating the second circuit to 20 kilovolt in Bekaa. The second circuit in Bekaa is expected within the coming 6 months. Achieving the balance between generation and demand reserve power, and that by implementing the ministry plan for generation, hence achieving the capability to overcome the full or partial unavailability of the expected integrated renewable energy like wind farms and PV farms. The steps to be taken also, the interconnection with the neighboring electric power systems, which leads to, first, availability of large scale of power exchange, hence reducing the percentage of renewables with respect to the volume of the unified network, and thus reducing its bad impacts like voltage fluctuations. Energy storage is an additional developed method to ensure reliability on the grid. As renewable energy penetrations grows, the increasing mismatch between variation of renewable energy resources and electricity demand make it necessary to capture electricity generated by wind, solar, and other renewable sources for a later use. Storage can help in achieving smooth fluctuations in both wind and solar energy generation. Also, the implementation of new technologies to tackle the stability problems of electrical grid are essential, like installing static voltage controls under various load conditions, static VAR compensators to compensate the unwanted reactive power and accordingly reduce the transmission losses, frequency stabilizer including active power storage and injections that help in damping the active power oscillations, hence eliminating the need of the must-run units, since this equipment bridges the time gap until the primary reserves are fully available, and preventing from blackouts. Short-circuit current limiters by triggering thyristor switch to insert high impedance to limit the currents, and thus short-circuit current ratings of the existing infrastructure can be kept. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rancy. Now, I would like to say 2 things. The first, from a colleague, Pierre, we have direct messages on Twitter of FISUEL, that in direct you can see some message sometimes concerning these events in Lebanon. The second, as I said at the beginning, we can ask questions, but as we have no many time, I suggest only 2 or 3 maximum questions to the different speakers, Mr. Ushida, Mr. Vigier, Mr. Nem, Dr. Mortada, Mr. Diab, and Mr. Dobesi. If you have questions concerning their presentation, you have the floor. One here.
Hello, Serge Risha. I would like to ask Mr. Alexandre Vigier. During his presentation, he was, you were actually saying that you were comparing with the decrees, the new laws that you adopted in Nouvelle-Calédonie about the tariffs for the resale of energy. And I would like to ask if I'm not mistaken, in Lebanon we do not have, as of today, or still, we do not have a law that would allow us to sell the excess of energy to the grid. So my question is, how la rentabilité of this? How would I convince someone that it would be rentable to do it when he cannot sell it to to the grid.
It's so difficult to translate because you have said a lot of things, but I understood rentability with the decrease of the price, no?
Comment convaincre le client que c'est rentable pour lui d'installer un tel système?
Alors, effectivement, il y a deux choses. Il y a le fait d'autoconsommer, ce qui rend le propriétaire de l'installation, qui devient un producteur, acteur de sa consommation. Et la possibilité de revendre le surplus lui permet en fait d'augmenter l'amortissement de l'installation. Donc c'est ce qu'on appelle un gagnant-gagnant. Notamment pour les particuliers, le rachat est aux 2/3 de l'énergie vendue. Donc l'idée étant toujours de ne pas acheter. Alors si je donne des chiffres, on est en francs, en francs pacifiques. Donc on achète au distributeur 32 francs, on revend à 21 francs. Pour le distributeur, ça ne pose pas de problème parce que lui, il achète 21 francs et il revend au voisin 32 francs. Donc finalement, pour lui, pas de problème. Pour le propriétaire de l'installation, il y a une rentabilité dans l'amortissement de l'installation qui est réduit, ce qui permet aujourd'hui d'amortir une installation sur 7 années à peu près. Tout en revendant. Si on ne revend pas, l'amortissement d'une telle installation est aux alentours de 12 ans à 13 ans. Aujourd'hui, avec l'achat, la possibilité de faire racheter l'électricité par le distributeur d'énergie, le concessionnaire du réseau, ça permet de diminuer l'amortissement et donc ça favorise l'achat et l'installation. C'est pour ça qu'on arrive aujourd'hui à des puissances qui commencent à devenir intéressantes. Après se pose le problème de la gestion du réseau, mais ça ne nous concerne pas, c'est le gestionnaire de réseau. J'ai répondu à la question? Ok, merci.
Very good, thanks. Another question before the lunch? Everything is understood? No, here.
Ok, merci. Serge Guy de l'Agence de régulation et l'électricité Cameroun. Et ma question allait un peu dans le même sens que celui de tout à l'heure. Ma question allait dans le même sens que celle de tout à l'heure. Bon, ça devait s'adresser à monsieur de la Nouvelle-Calédonie et la dame du Liban qui parlait de docteur Mortada du Liban. Donc je voudrais savoir, il a parlé tout à l'heure de 2/3 de l'énergie vendue. Donc je voudrais savoir si c'était l'énergie connectée au réseau. Si c'est le cas, comment c'est encadré? Et pour la dame qui est en train de dire tout à l'heure qu'il n'y a pas encore de réglementation au niveau du Liban, comment c'est encadré au niveau du Liban, ce qui se connecte au réseau? Et s'il y a un tarif de rachat aussi au niveau du Liban.
Alors, tout est encadré par des arrêtés du gouvernement. Donc dans les arrêtés du gouvernement, il y a le prix de rachat. Alors quand j'ai parlé de 2/3, c'était pour éviter de parler de prix. Comme je disais, par exemple, pour un particulier, il achète 32 francs et il revend 21 francs. C'est pour que ce soit gagnant-gagnant pour tout le monde. Parce qu'effectivement, si le distributeur d'énergie rachète au même prix qu'il le vend, finalement, il n'y a aucun intérêt pour lui. Donc il fallait quand même qu'il y ait ce petit détail. Ça lui permet à lui d'avoir des infrastructures supplémentaires pour la gestion de son réseau, notamment les infrastructures logicielles. D'accord? Donc tout est cadré dans les arrêtés, l'attestation de conformité, les contrôles, les autorisations d'exploiter, les autorisations de raccordement, et donc ce fameux prix de rachat, qui est un prix fixe, parce qu'aujourd'hui, bon, l'énergie en Calédonie est relativement stable. Le prix n'a pas évolué depuis 12 ans à peu près. Donc ils ont pu établir ça. Ensuite, pour les professionnels, ça devient un petit peu plus intéressant, c'est ce que je disais, le prix d'achat est égal au prix de vente. Donc nous, par exemple, nous sommes des professionnels, nous avons une installation photovoltaïque, donc là on joue sur le prix d'amortissement, donc on favorise finalement l'installation et l'investissement de la part des particuliers, des habitations collectives, donc les bailleurs sociaux ou les promoteurs, et pour les professionnels, c'est un petit peu la même chose. Voilà. Est-ce que j'ai répondu à la question ? Le cadre, en fait, le cadre est législatif, c'est-à-dire que le gouvernement a décidé et a mis en place.
Oui, merci. Si les IPP ne s'occupent pas de la demande, comment est-ce que ces installations restent toujours performantes?
Alors, les installations restent performantes. Alors, justement, va être mis en place, parce que vous avez vu, on est à 3 ans de recul. 3 ans, c'est pas énorme. Hein. Tout ça, c'est ce que je disais avec humour. L'encre des arrêtés n'est pas encore sèche, hein, presque. Les arrêtés datent de 2015, 2016 et 2018. Donc, on va engager déjà toute une série d'audits sur les performances des installations. On exige de toute façon certains matériels et pas d'autres. Voilà, donc il y a toutes les normes de produits qui permettent au moins d'avoir une rentabilité sur une vingtaine d'années, en tout cas une performance énergétique qui est stable sur une vingtaine d'années. Donc ça va avec le contrat. Et va s'engager des audits d'ici à 5 ans. Justement, je disais que les contrôles sont exhaustifs aujourd'hui pour bien cadrer la filière. Une fois que la filière sera stable, peut-être qu'on va diminuer les contrôles, mais par contre, on va entamer une série d'audits. Alors des audits qui seront très larges sur les performances énergétiques, bien sûr, voir si ça couvre les besoins, voir si les amortissements financiers sont ceux qui étaient prévus, mais également en termes de fixation, parce que les fixations des panneaux restent quelque chose que nous ne contrôlons pas et qui pourrait arriver à une certaine dérive, étant donné que on ne sait pas trop si des fois les panneaux sont repris sur les toitures elles-mêmes ou sur les pannes des toitures, ce qui est une grosse différence. Voilà, j'espère que j'ai répondu à la question. Ouais. Merci.
Second answer with Dr. Sorina. Where is she? She's out. She left? Okay, that's no problem. The last questions. All the presentation was correct, understood, that we can go to lunch. I invite you to come here at 2:30 and invite Pierre Selva, Moonbach, and Chadi Nora, Dr. Chadi Nora, to take chair near the President and the Treasurer. Thank you and see you at 2:30.
Patrick, à 2, pas 2:30.
Non, c'était 2h30. Do you want at 2 o'clock? 2h30? It was the time at the origin, 2:30, don't 2:30. Oui. Ah. Je vais le mettre avec le mien.